is called Jesus is the Question. And more specifically, Jesus is the question to our answers, because once we think we've got them all figured out, he keeps surprising us with more. But today the question is, what do you want me to do for you? What do you want me to do for you? This question is asked by Jesus 2 times within 13 verses of each other. It's found in the Gospel of Mark, and we're going to be in the Gospel of Mark around chapter 10, if you want to turn there. That's where we'll be camping out this morning. But I thought I'd start with this little story I found because it asks this question. And for those of you who get offended, I apologize if this offends you, but I'm going to use the word old geezer. I asked someone who's older if that's a bad term. I don't think it is yet, but you'll see why I need to use this in the story. But an old geezer became very bored during retirement. And so he decided to open a medical clinic with all the information he learned online. And so he put up a sign outside that said, Dr. Geezer's Clinic. Get your treatment for $500. If not cured, get back $1,000. So Dr. Young, who was a real doctor, he was positive that this old geezer had no idea what he's talking about, so he was determined to get some money. So he went to Dr. Geezer's clinic. And Dr. Geezer asked, what do you want me to do for you? He said, Dr. Geezer, I've lost all taste in my mouth. Can you please help me? Dr. Geezer said, nurse, please bring me the medicine from box 22 and put 3 drops in Dr. Young's mouth. It's gasoline. He goes, congratulations. You got your taste back. That'll be $500. Dr. Young gets annoyed, but after a few days, he goes back looking to recover his money. Dr. Geezer says, well, young man, what can I do for you? What do you want me to do for you? He says, I've lost my memory. I can't remember anything. Dr. Geezer said, nurse, please bring medicine from box 22 and put 3 drops in the patient's mouth. He says, No, that's gasoline. He says, congratulations. You have got your memory back. That'll be $500. Dr. Young now has lost $1,000. He leaves angrily, but he still comes back trying to recover his money. Dr. Geezer says, it's good to see you again. What do you want me to do for you? Dr. Young says, my eyesight has become weak. I can hardly see anything. Well, I don't have any medicine for that. So here's your $1,000 back. But he only gives him 10. Hold on a second. That's only $10. Congratulations. You've got your vision back. That'll be $500. So what's the moral of this story? Just for you old geezers, this is what. Just because you're young doesn't mean that you can ever outsmart an old geezer. Now, it's a silly story. But it's a perfect introduction for today's message because Jesus is asking a question, what do you want me to do for you? And this message is about how well we see. And so, do we see clearly? Do we see fuzzy? Do we see a little bit unfocused? Are we unclear? And before we get to the 2 times that Jesus actually asks this question, I think it's really important that we get some clarity as to why he asked this question. But just imagine if Jesus was to come into our audience today. Like Francis says, God's singing with us. I believe Jesus is with us here right now. So just pretend for a moment that Jesus is sitting beside you. Jesus is sitting beside you and he asks you the question, what do you want me to do for you? Because I think everyone's going to have a different answer. But if I'm honest, that answer would be based on my selfishness, something I want him to take care of in my life for me. So, Mark 8:22 through 26, there's these details that he gives basically about Jesus who's about to heal a blind man. Now, we're going to do a blind man sandwich. You'll see what's happening here in a moment. But Jesus sees this blind man, or this blind man is brought to him. But this happens right on the heels where Jesus had fed 5,000 people. And then He's just fed 4,000 people. So Jesus can do miraculous things with only a few pieces of food. And yet now the disciples are about to go on a boat, and they've got one loaf of bread. And this incredible display of Jesus' power and authority didn't seem to get into their minds, because Jesus asks them a question as they're on the boat. And he says, "Be careful," Jesus warned them. "Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod." And they begin wondering, he knows we only have one loaf of bread and that we didn't prepare very well for this journey. And so they begin discussing why Jesus said this. In other words, they're not seeing clearly. So Jesus asks a few questions. He says, "Why are you still talking about having no bread?" And then he says, "Do you still not understand? Are your hearts hardened?" And this question, "Do you have eyes but fail to see? Do you have ears but fail to hear?" And so then Jesus begins with some math questions. And when I say math questions, I mean, he says, "Don't you remember?" He said, "Don't you remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up?" 12, they said. "And when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up?" 7, they answered. He said to them, "Do you still not understand?" And I'm sorry, I just have to say this. I don't understand. I don't know what the saying and the meaning is of what Jesus is asking. I have a feeling that it has to do with those numbers meant something. Those numbers actually meant something to them, that they were supposed to see a little bit more than they could see. Now, this whole encounter reminded me of a kid's snippet video. And so I have to show this to you because I think we can understand as we watch this kid snippet video together that sometimes math questions are very difficult for us to understand. And when we don't want to let the teacher on to know that we don't understand, we kind of pretend we do. And so what Kid Snippets is all about is they take 2 young children, and we have young children here, and I love it. We have 2 young children, and they have a conversation, and they record the conversation. But then they take that conversation, and they have older people act it out. So you'll see what I mean in just a second, but see if you can relate to where you're supposed to understand something, but you really don't.
Okay, here's your homework. First, let me tell you the directions. What's 4 take away 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Take away. What's 6 take away 1? 1. No, you take away 1 out of 6. How much does it equal? What's 10 minus 1? I don't know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Nope. Take away 1. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Nope. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 8 and 1 more. And add 1 more. How many does it equal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1. It makes 9. See how you take away? You take away 1 and it equals 1. Do you get it now? Yes.
Do you ever feel like you're supposed to see something clearly, but you just don't understand? Here we have disciples not comprehending what Jesus is trying to get them to see. And it's like these kids trying to explain math to each other. I think we can all relate. And maybe it's what the miracle that Jesus is about to do. Maybe this is what he was trying to get us to understand. Because a blind man is brought to Jesus. And Jesus sees this blind man, but he takes him out into the village, out of the village, away where it's a little more quiet. And I don't know exactly why he did this, other than the fact he's still probably not trying to bring a lot of attention to himself. And he brings him out of the village, and here is where he starts to heal his sight. But listen to how he does it. Jesus put some spit on the man's eyes, and he put his hands on him. And Jesus asks, "Do you see anything?" He looked up and said, "I see people, but they look like trees. They look like trees walking around." Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. And I've asked myself for years, why on earth does Jesus do this? Did he fail the first time? Or was he trying to get us to see something? Trying to get his disciples to see something? But this is really bizarre, because it seems like Jesus kind of mixed up his power a little bit. Didn't put enough power into the first time of healing. Or maybe he's running low on fuel. But maybe he was trying to teach us and his disciples something, that there's times when we don't fully see properly. Maybe there's times when we miss the point. And like in this math situation here, where we just come to the point and say, yes, I understand, but I have no clue. And maybe we completely miss what Jesus wants us to see and what he's inviting us into. So in the next few chapters in Mark, we have these instances where the disciples are trying to figure Jesus out. And so I want to look at some examples, because maybe this healing of this blind man that took twice, where a point where he could see people, but they all look like trees walking around, to a point where now he could see clearly, is basically our journey as we follow Jesus. Because here's some examples between these two blind people being healed. We'll get to the next one in just a moment. But Peter has just been asked by Jesus as they travel along, that he says, "Who do the people say I am?" We looked at this question 2 weeks ago. And he says, "Oh, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, but who do you say I am?" And he answers the question. He says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Yes, he sees who Jesus is. But within that same conversation, Jesus starts to predict how he is going to die and how he is going to be killed. Peter objects. "Never, Lord, never will this happen to you." And he actually says he rebuked Jesus. So Jesus turns the rebuke on Peter, because Peter could see, but he couldn't see clearly. And then we have this transfiguration moment where Jesus' closest disciples got to follow him up a mountain, Peter, James, and John. And they got to see something incredible, where Jesus was transfigured before them. The Bible talks about it being, his clothes were bleached whiter than white. The shining of this Jesus was just incredible. And then all of a sudden we have Elijah and Moses with them. And Peter's like, "We need to build some shelters. We need to build some tents here for them." Then there's a voice from heaven that comes, and it's audible. And God says, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him." And then all of a sudden, Elijah and Moses disappeared. And Peter, James, and John are confused. What does this mean? See, Peter, James, and John could see, but they could not see clearly. Then Jesus explains to them a second time that he is going to be betrayed. The Son of Man is going to be betrayed in the hands of men. They're going to kill him, and after 3 days he will rise. Do you know what it says? It says they did not understand what he meant, and they were afraid to ask him about it, because they could see, but they did not see clearly. And then, as they're walking along, the disciples started to get into this little heated argument about who is the greatest. And so Jesus is walking a little bit further ahead of them, and they're having this argument about which one of these disciples is the greatest. And so Jesus could hear them as they're walking to Capernaum, and he turns around, he says, "What are you arguing about along the road?" But they kept quiet. They were too embarrassed to say what they're arguing about. But Jesus knows all things, and he takes a moment to give them a lesson of just who is going to be the greatest in the kingdom. And he says, if anyone wants to be first, he must be the very last and servant of all. You see, these disciples and this argument was a sign that they could see, but they could not see clearly. And then there's this argument about whoever is for us and who is against us. Who is it? And so we do this a lot in our lives, right? We like to judge about who's in and who's out. Well, so do the disciples. And John wants to know and wants to show Jesus. And he's coming to Jesus and he says, "You're going to be proud of me, Jesus, because there was a man who was driving out demons in your name. And you know what I told him? I told him to stop because he was not one of us." You know what Jesus said? Don't stop him. No one who does a miracle in my name can in the next moment say anything bad about me. For whoever is not against us is for us. I tell you the truth. Anyone who gives you a cup of water, listen to this. Anyone who gives you a cup of water in my name because you belong to Christ will certainly not lose his reward. Man, Jesus just narrowed down to this idea of who's in and who's out. I love this quote. The quote is, we have no permission to have our nose in the books of heaven. Let God take care of that. You see, John could see, but he could not see clearly. And then I was reminded of this morning. We have children that love to run. We have children that love to run. And listen to what the disciples would have done if they saw this happening. People are bringing little children to Jesus to have him touch them, but the disciples rebuked them. Jesus, however, saw this and he became angry. "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these." And then he says something really profound. "I tell you the truth, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." And then he took the children in his arms and he blessed them. You see, the disciples could see, but they could not see clearly. And now we're going to have a transition because we're going to get to the question today of what do you want me to do for you? And this comes at a time where Jesus is going to ask this 2 different times. And depending on whether you or I see clearly, we're going to see which one is the better answer to the question. So keep in mind that Jesus now has just told him a 3rd time how he is going to be delivered over to the chief priests and how he's going to be delivered to the teachers of the law, those who should know their scriptures. These are the people who ran the temple. They will condemn him to death and hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit on him and flog him and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. So imagine hearing that. Imagine hearing Jesus say that. You've been walking with him for almost 3 years now, and he says that. Would this be the next thing that you say? Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. "Teacher," they said, "we want you to do whatever we ask." "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. They replied, "Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in glory." You see, they can see. They can see that this is Jesus the Messiah. But they can't see clearly because they have no clue at what kind of kingdom Jesus is actually introducing them to and what's breaking forth, because they can't see clearly, because they are looking for positions of power. They're looking for authority over people. And what the Gospel of Mark is doing, the writer of Mark, who is Mark, is painting a picture of James and John being caught up in popularity and power, and they can't see reality. You see, James and John are observing observing the popularity of Jesus. This isn't going to be great. What a great leader we have. If we can just stay close to him, wow, we can have these positions of power and authority as well. But they're not at all in tune with the harsh political reality that Jesus is about to be handed over to those who hate his life. And they want to see something, they're going to see something very humiliating in the next few days. And James and John have no earthly idea of what they're asking. They are blind. They're blind. And the power and the authority that James and John are looking for belongs to a different kingdom. It's not the kingdom that Jesus is breaking forth and opening. The kingdom of Jesus is not about pride and arrogance. It's about service and humility. And the leader in this kingdom is at the back of the line. The whole worldly kingdoms get flipped upside down, where the leader becomes the servant. And James and John cannot see it because they can't see clearly. Listen to the next thing that Jesus says. You do not know what you are asking, Jesus said. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? We can. We can, because we're prideful. Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right hand or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. In other words, Jesus is alluding to the cross that he must bear. Jesus knows he's going to be crucified. But he also knows that these men are going to have to take up their own crosses as well. And yet they don't see it like that yet. This is really interesting, because then all of a sudden the gossip gets around to the other 10, and they hear of this conversation. And you know what happens? They became indignant with James and John. They were angry. And Jesus called them all together and said, you know, that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, because it's all about power. And their high officials exercise authority over them. In other words, they step on anyone to get to the top. That's how the worldly kingdom works. But not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. See, Jesus helped his disciples see a little more clearly. It was completely different than what they would have perceived in their own minds. And James and John, you know, if you read it in Matthew, it's actually a little bit worse. Because it wasn't James and John that came to Jesus, it was actually their mother. Their mother came to Jesus and said, hey, can my sons have the best places, the seats right beside you on your right and your left? I mean, this would have made the disciples furious. But Jesus talks to them about what it looks like in his kingdom. So now we're going to just move to our attention to Bartimaeus. Maybe he sees something that the disciples don't. See, the next few verses in Mark chapter 10 introduce us to this gentleman named Bartimaeus. And right at this moment, he doesn't see anything because he's blind. He's a beggar. He sits by the side of the road, but he has good ears. He has really good ears. He has good ears because he heard the commotion, but there's something else he understands. He understands and is anticipating the arrival of Jesus, the Son of David. And so he hears this commotion going on. It's coming down the street, and he asks, who's coming? What is this? And they say, it's Jesus of Nazareth. And so all of a sudden, he starts to yell at the top of his voice. Jesus of Nazareth, he says, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. See, already this blind man has more insight than the ones that Jesus was with. And most of the disciples and the religious leaders didn't understand this about Jesus. And Jesus probably hadn't heard this title in a while. They're telling him to be quiet. But he yells all the more, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Now, this time in the Greek, it's more like they're telling him to shut your mouth. But he yells all the louder. Jesus hears him, maybe recognizing the title. Who's this guy yelling this out? He stopped. It says, call him. So they called the blind man. He said, cheer up, get on your feet. He's calling you. Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. And here we have the second time Jesus asks this question. What do you want me to do for you? Jesus asked him. And the blind man said something really interesting. And of course, he wants his blindness healed. But I believe this is telling us more by the way he responds after he's healed. He says, Rabbi, I want to see. I want to see. This question was asked 15 verses before. And the answer to this question was out of pride and arrogance, because we want to sit at your right and your left. This man just wants to see. And yet here's this blind man who seemed to know exactly who Jesus was and what he could do for them. It seems that Bartimaeus could see clearer than all of the disciples, and yet he was blind. Bartimaeus is teaching us that there is only one answer to this question. What do you want me to do for you? If Jesus came in our midst today and he was sitting with you, I think the answer needs to be, I want to see. I want to see. This is why. Because the obstacle to seeing is not blindness. It's the illusion that you can already see. The obstacle to seeing is not blindness. It's the illusion that you can already see. So today I want you to invite you to come to Jesus and ask him to open our eyes. Let's ask him to open our eyes so that we don't just see what we want to see. That he will show us what he's doing and what he's up to all around us. What is he inviting us into? Let's ask Jesus to open our eyes so that we can see clearly. And we invite the Holy Spirit to come in and heal us of those areas of blindness in our lives. And if Jesus was to come into our audience today and sit right down beside us, and he asks, what do you want me to do for you? If your answer was to be, I want to see, what do you think you'll see? Would we begin to see those that are really struggling? Would we begin to see that there are needs that are all around us and that many of us are unaware of? Would you begin to see those who are just kind of barely hanging on to their faith? Would you begin to see those who are on the margins, those on the fringes, who are hoping that maybe, just maybe, as they walk into this place of worship, that they'll be able to find Jesus here? And maybe when Jesus healed the first blind man in 2 stages, it was because he's trying to get us to see that we need to be healed from our spiritual blindness and able to see more clearly. I think Jesus, the reason he didn't have to heal Bartimaeus in 2 stages was because he could already see. He could see clearly. And as Jesus heals Bartimaeus, it's really incredible. It goes, go. Jesus said, your faith has healed you. Immediately he received his sight and he went home. No, he followed Jesus along the road. Why? Because there was nothing more important in his life. He wanted to see his physical sight and be able to see clearly so that he could follow Jesus. And we are a church that is here to help people find and follow Jesus. And I love the fact that this man was told to go, and yet no, he stayed and followed Jesus. And my prayer is that the more we are able to see, that we will see that Jesus is worth following. That's my prayer this morning. I don't know where this lands with you, but I pray and hope that as we are about to take communion, that we'll just remember that maybe we're blind to some things. And let's just sit in awe and in reverence of God and this Jesus and remember him who can give sight to the blind. And maybe we need to receive our sight. And if you just think about that as we have this time of silence together where we can remember him. Last weekend, I got to go with Bruce Hodnott and Linda to their cottage for one night. But Bruce and I got there early, and we went on to, I call them ATVs. They call them quads. I think you know what they are. Anyway, we went across the lake, and that's because it was frozen. It wouldn't work that well in the summer. But we went across the lake. We went through the trails to this place where it was completely quiet. Bruce wanted to take me there because he goes, I go here, and it's just incredible. There is a deafening sound, and it's called silence. When you can get away from all the noise and all the just busyness of everything. And we got there to this place in the woods, and we shut the machines off, and we just sat. We actually sat there for about 20 minutes, and we didn't even talk to each other. We just listened. We listened to the silence. And I don't know, there's something about being in the silence that you start to feel that you're in the presence of God. Through his creation, just the wonder, the snow was lightly falling all around us. But then we began to pray. We started to pray for our families, for each other, and for you, and for the church here. And for what Jesus is doing, and this idea of help us to see what you want us to see. And so many times we are so distracted that we cannot see what he's trying to get us to see. One of the questions that I have going on in my mind after we've been doing some things on Wednesday night, going through the Old Testament, is how long was the burning bush burning before Moses saw it? I just wonder, it's just a question. There may be theology behind it, but I'm wondering how many times is God doing things that he's inviting us into that I'm just blind to? Help us to see. Help us to take time alone. Jesus knew how important it was to sneak away and be with his Father alone. There were many times they were searching for Jesus and couldn't find him, but he was alone with his Father. And there's something about being in silence. And so this morning, as we remember Christ, if you haven't already, there's a communion package at the back, and you're more than welcome to take this with us. We're going to remember Christ together. So if you need to get one, you can do that now.